Okay, welcome back, and very timely, as always, an honor to have with us Robert Spencer. He's the director of Jihad Watch, Shulman Fellow there at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He's also the best-selling author of The History of Jihad, The Palestinian Delusion, and Did Muhammad Exist? His latest book will be published coming up, well, it's probably already out there, called Antisemitism, History and Myth. And there is a picture of the cover of the book, Antisemitism, History and Myth, Robert Spencer. And the website is jihadwatch.org. And there's the picture of the landing page, jihadwatch.org. Robert, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Always good to see you, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We value it greatly. Okay, obviously the rise of anti-Semitism has caused you to write a book. What'd you find out in doing the research here?
Well, it goes back. A lot of people think that it started with Christianity, and there is a strain of Christian anti-Semitism that still exists. But one of the things that I found out was that anti-Semitism actually originated earlier than Christianity, and Christianity is the only form of, or the only source, we could say, of anti-Semitism that has actually repudiated it, with the mainstream understandings of the New Testament passages that historically gave rise to anti-Semitism, mostly having been, actually all of them, having been, the anti-Semitic interpretations of them having been rejected by leaders of all the major denominations, and the mainstream understandings of these passages are no longer used except by, unfortunately, a still persistent fringe. They're no longer used in an anti-Semitic manner.
So, I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question. What was it about October 7th that was so obvious to so many people, but yet created an insurgence of rise of anti-Semitism?
Perry, it seems to me that it was planned, that there were powerful people who knew that the October 7th attacks were going to happen, and they were ready with a PR campaign to portray Israel as evil, as the real aggressor, as the supposed starter of the whole conflict, and they were ready to roll out nationwide and worldwide protests against Israel to try to turn global public opinion against the sole Jewish state. And obviously, they've been highly successful at that. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because of this resurgence of anti-Semitism that we've seen around the world since October 7th. I think it's a clearly, carefully planned and well-financed operation. I don't know who exactly is behind it, but it seems to me to be clear that they are interested in demonizing the Jews so that they can justify another large-scale victimization of the Jewish people, such as we saw during the Holocaust.
All right, so let's go back, Robert, before we go forward. How far back does this go, anti-Semitism?
It goes back to the pre-Christian Roman Empire and to some writers, notably Philo of Alexandria, who was in the 1st century BC, and he and others made all these claims about how the Jews had various secret rituals that differed from the teachings of their own scriptures, that they were secretly working to subvert the non-Jewish society. And these things actually still spread, these stories still spread to this day. But it all came down to the fact that the Jews would not pay obeisance to the Roman gods, which is, of course, the same thing that the early Christians, who were largely Jews themselves, got into trouble with the Romans with as well, that the Romans had all these gods and room for any number of gods you wanted, but you had to worship them all. You had to agree that they were all gods. And so the Romans were perfectly willing to accept the Jewish God and the divinity of Christ himself, but it didn't work in the other direction. The Jews, neither the Jews nor the Christians, were willing to accept all the Roman gods, and so the Romans, angry that they would not assimilate, began to persecute them.
Okay. I guess I have to ask a tough question here. How does Christianity play into anti-Semitism?
Well, unfortunately, there has been the idea throughout the history of the church that the Jews are the killers of Christ. And because Christ is God, they're the killers of God himself. And this charge of deicide,
Mm.
it's about the worst thing you can accuse somebody of doing. And it has followed them throughout history. And of course, there are a few scriptures that give rise to this. Paul says in First Thessalonians, or I believe it's first, it might be second, but in any case, that the Jews killed Christ. He says that basically in so many words. And in Matthew, of course, when Jesus is on the cross and Pontius Pilate says, I'm innocent. I mean, before Jesus is on the cross, when he's on trial, Pontius Pilate says, I'm innocent of this man's blood. And the Jews cry out, his blood be upon us and upon our children. Anti-Semites throughout history have said, you see, this means that all the Jews are responsible for the killing of Christ, and that they all bear a special fault for it. Now, it seems to me this is in total contradiction to basic Christianity across denominations, because we're always taught, and all the churches teach, that it's our sins that put the Lord on the cross. It's because I am a bad guy that Jesus was on the cross. And it's not because of any one particular person or one particular group. It's everybody's fault and responsibility. And this is one of the reasons why he redeems all of our sins on the cross, because he, as God, can bear them all. So it's sin that put him there, and sin he is expiating. So to blame a particular people for this contradicts that. If it's the Jews' fault, how can it be every single human being's fault, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God?
So I guess where it tilts my brain is I'll do a show like this. When I get done, I'll get off the air, and I will hear from Christians defending what you just explained. That, and that is that the Jews don't belong, the Jews forfeited their rights, so to speak.
Oh, you mean defending the anti-Semitic idea?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, well, there again, Perry, one of the reasons why I wrote the book, that it seemed to me these things are resurgent nowadays. We see prominent people, not just prominent people on the left, where leftist anti-Semitism has been strong for years, although largely unacknowledged. We also see it among people many of us admired and thought had sense, like Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson. It's a shame that this is happening, but it needs to be confronted. And I think that we need to, as Christians especially, we need to rebuke this within the Christian community and show people how this contradicts the whole idea of the redemption that Christ won for us.
Mm.
That if only one group put Jesus on the cross, then how is he redeeming the sins of everyone? It is the sin that put him there, and nobody is without sin.
Wow. Because part of the stuff that we're seeing today and experiencing is an indicator, is the recent teaching that the Old Testament is insignificant. We don't need it today.
Well, that's the Marcionite heresy. You know, it was within the lifetime of disciples of the 12 apostles, that is, people who learned from Paul, from John, from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, from the 12 apostles, and they were still alive in the early year, excuse me, in the early years of the 2nd century, in the 130s, when there was a teacher named Marcian, excuse me, who rejected the Old Testament and taught that it was not the same God that was depicted in the New Testament. And this was officially rejected by the leaders of the church, including people who had learned from the apostles. This is something that has been a temptation of the church at various points throughout its history. During World War II, and actually before World War II, when the National Socialists took control in Germany, the church was confronted with a resurgence of Marcionism. And it again had to be explicitly rejected by the Lutheran leaders in Germany, by the Roman Catholic leaders in Germany, by other Christian leaders elsewhere, that this was not the way we understand the faith. And it's that kind of thinking actually is what gives rise to the idea that the Jews are this somehow particularly evil people, that we don't believe anymore in Romans 3:23 that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It's just them, not us.
Wow. One last question, and again, a difficult question to ask, especially in light of the headlines today, but how would you describe the Roman Catholic faith with Judaism?
Well, they are actually one of the groups that I was referring to earlier when I was saying that Christianity is unique in having rejected anti Semitism. And the Roman Catholic Church, I'm not a Catholic, but I have to give them credit for the fact that they were out front in this. And that's actually fitting because there is a terrible history, there's no denying it, of anti Semitism within the Roman Catholic Church. It was when Western Europe was completely Roman Catholic that Jews were terribly persecuted. I detail all this in the book, but it was also the Roman Catholic Church at the Second Vatican Council in the mid 1960s that officially repudiated the idea that the Jews were responsible in some special way for killing the Lord, and that anti Semitism was to be completely rejected as part of any kind of Christianity. And so other churches followed their lead on this, and that's all to the good because, well, as I explained, I don't see how this is compatible with any understanding of Christianity at all.
Are you concerned now that the Pope has passed away and they're looking for a new leader, a new, Pope here, that the relationship between the Church and Judaism, or in particular Israel, could change?
Yeah, it very much could, Perry, because this last Pope who just died, he was very bad in regard to Israel. He uncritically accepted Hamas propaganda regarding the casualties in Gaza. He uncritically accepted the whole framing of the conflict from the Hamas side, that the Palestinian people are the oppressed indigenous people of the region who've been displaced from their land. None of that is actually true. They're not the indigenous people, they're not oppressed, and they weren't displaced from their land. And I explained that actually all in an earlier book, The Palestinian Delusion. But the Pope, Pope Francis, he uncritically repeated all this, and I understand that he appointed almost half of the cardinals who are serving today, and it's the cardinals who get together to pick the next pope. So likely we will see another pope who follows Francis's line, and that could be very bad for Jews and for the relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and Israel.
Well, all right, let me take a quick break. Check out Robert's latest book, and I think you'll find it to be pretty fascinating. He's done his research on this, Anti-Semitism, History and Myth. There's a picture of the cover of the book. He has a website, jihadwatch.org. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Always an honor to have with us Robert Spencer. Robert has authored quite a few books. His latest one I think you'll find to be really quite informative. It's called Anti-Semitism, History or Myth. There's a picture of the cover of the book. Check out his other books, and you can do so at jihadwatch.org. And there's a picture of the landing page. So, Robert, things in the Middle East are interesting these days, seems to be heating up. There's one thing that both sides are saying, and I'm meaning the United States and Israel, both saying that Iran cannot have a nuke. But getting to a point where they would eliminate the nuke seems to be a little bit problematic at the moment. Is the United States and Israel on the same page today?
It doesn't look as if they are, Perry, as far as we can tell from published reports, but clearly there's quite a lot going on behind the scenes. Nevertheless, the published reports have been that Israel was just about to strike Iran's nuclear sites and Trump had given the go-ahead on that, but then was dissuaded by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and some others who said that this will lead to a wider conflict in the Middle East that will draw the United States in. And on that basis, Trump reversed himself and told the Israelis to hold off. Obviously, the last chapter of this story has not yet been written, however, and it would seem as if at some point Israel and or the US is going to have to strike Iran's nuclear sites, or Iran's going to nuke Israel. And that's really just a foregone conclusion. If Iran has nuclear weapons, they will nuke Israel. They want to see the Israeli state destroyed. And so if they can do it, they will do it.
So, is it possible that Israel would go at it alone?
Yes, it is possible. Trump gave them the green light. The Biden administration was working hard, as you know, Perry, for years to stymie Israel's war efforts. But Trump essentially has said, do what you need to do to take care of this. Now, it would seem as if it's a little bit in dispute right now as to whether that extends to Iran's nuclear program. But as I say, it's going to have to be handled one way or the other at some point, or the results could, or the consequences could be catastrophic. So if Israel has to go it alone, they probably will.
You have mentioned before that one of the things that the United States has to consider if they do attack Iran is the sales within the United States. How significant is that?
If they do attack Iran, the sales within the United States, did you say?
You know,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The terrorist cells within the United States.
Oh, cells within the United States.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a very real possibility too. But there's really nothing that can be done about that unless somewhere, maybe in the corridors of the NSA, hidden away, they actually know where these people are and what they're up to. Unfortunately, the Biden administration and the Obama administration before it have been so irresponsible and so unguarded regarding Iran that there's any number of these people in place. We already know that there was an attempt to murder the Iranian dissident Masih Alinejad a few years back in New York. There was, before that, an attempt in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. to murder another Iranian dissident. And so this kind of thing, we already know the Iranian cells are here. It's just a matter of when they're going to strike. And so if Iran is struck in its nuclear program, they might take that opportunity, but also they might continue to remain in the shadows and bide their time until some other more opportune moment that they judge. So unfortunately, we're in a situation now where there's no guarding against this. The people are already here. They're already waiting for word. I remember, Perry, back in 2008, I wrote a book called Stealth Jihad. That's a long time ago now, 17 years ago now, about nonviolent activities to spread Islam and Sharia in the United States. And in the course of researching that book, I found FBI communications saying that Hezbollah cells, and Hezbollah, remember, is just an arm of the Islamic Republic of Iran, were in place in the United States. But they had decided not to strike at any time in the foreseeable future because they were getting what they wanted via nonviolent means as it was. And they thought if they'd made a violent attack, they would bring down law enforcement on them and that would stymie their activities. So that was 17 years ago. And it's only gotten worse since then.
Is it possible, again, this is, speculation here, but is it possible that part of the administration's delay is two things? One is to let the world know that everything diplomatic has been attempted. And two, to maybe in an intelligent way notify every police force in the United States for these possible cells reacting to an attack on Iran.
Yeah, I think that it's always unwise to underestimate Trump. People tend to think, especially on the left, that Trump is some kind of a dunce. Well, a dunce doesn't amass a billion-dollar fortune. And clearly, this is a very savvy negotiator, a very, very smart businessman who's extremely skillful in the area of negotiations. And so it may be exactly as you're saying, that he is setting up Iran to have no leg to stand on in terms of marshaling Western public opinion. Because, of course, we know, as we were discussing before, in regard to October 7th, Israel has taken a huge beating in terms of popular opinion. And the left and the pro-jihad forces have gained the entire initiative in terms of explaining that conflict and defining it for the public. And Trump doesn't want to see that happening with Iran. So I can see that as a very real possibility, that he's making sure that they're not going to be able to lose their nuclear program while winning in terms of Western public opinion.
One other quick thing. Let us not forget that B-52s, B-2s, and aircraft carriers are now in the region.
Yeah, and that could mean that they're ready for a wider conflict or getting ready for one as we speak. And so the Gabbard calling off, the DNI Gabbard calling off the strike at some point that was recent doesn't necessarily mean that it's off for good, but just that we'll be more prepared when it does come.
Robert, you're fascinating. Where can they get your book, buddy?
It's at any, if there are any bookstores out there, then ask them to order it. And meanwhile, it's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
What do you want the takeaway to be?
That this leads to genocide. It's already happened once. It could very easily happen again, and we need to head it off.
Do you think that the supposed turn of Palestinians against Hamas in Gaza is real?
I'm not sure that it is at all. I think it might be an attempt to stifle criticism of Hamas and co-opt it so that the aid money keeps rolling in. But even if it is real, it has to be noted, it was at least reported, whether or not it's true, that some of the leaders of the anti-Hamas demonstrations in Gaza have already been killed. So it's either fake or it's being stopped by Hamas itself. Neither one's a really great choice.
All right, check out the book, Anti-Semitism, History and Myth, and check out the website, jihadwatch.org. Very resourceful there. You can check out his other books and articles as well, jihadwatch.org. Robert, good to see you, buddy. God bless you. Stay in the fight.
Dude, thanks, Gary.